Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another How to Succeed podcast. This is How to Succeed at Avoiding Reactance with Brian Jackson, one of our Sandler trainers from San Diego. And we're going to have a great conversation talking about reactance. What is that? That's the unintended emotional response of a buyer and what we can do about it, how we can prevent it. Good stuff here brought to you today by Sandler, the worldwide leader in sales management and customer service training. If you need more information on Sandler, go to sandler.com. Check out all the good stuff we got going on there, free resources, fun events, and of course, that Sandler Summit happening and being promoted all year round. Next up is the virtual summit. We'll see you there. Go to sandler.com. All right, Brian, tell me a little bit about reactance. What is this and what are we talking about today?
Thanks, Mike. Good to see you again. Yes, reactance. So we recently, as you know, rolled out a completely redesigned set of online content, and I've really enjoyed the material that's been provided to us under the topic of negative reverse selling. If anybody wants to go in their Sandler Online and look at the stuff, it's under the topic of negative reverse selling. We learn that this guy, Jeff Greenberg, who is a social psychology professor, he brings up this principle of reactance. And what it is, and you already mentioned this a moment ago, it's the fact that we as humans want to exercise our freedom of choice when it is restricted. And we're inherently motivated to protect that freedom. It's not even a rational thing. You can see it, and this is where I love it. I see it all the time because I've got 4 kids, 16, 14, 12. They're all boys, and then I have a beautiful 5-year-old daughter. And whether it's teenagers or toddlers, I mean, you can see it from a young age. It's not rational. It's a natural human response that's driven by emotions. Whenever people feel that their freedom is being threatened, they're motivated to express their freedom and their free will. So that's reactance. And what I love about it is that I feel like everything, Sandler in his brilliance, he saw that all the traditional selling does is just trigger this reactance. And that the entire Sandler methodology really is built around making it so we as selling professionals do not trigger that reactance. Mm-hmm. Because I'll say this and then I'll let you jump in here. There's 2 types of no's. One of them is okay and one of them's not okay. The no that's okay is when you have a truly disqualified prospect and you get a no. Great. Thank you. Thank you for telling me the truth. I'm going to move on. I have other things that I can focus on. That's great. That's a gift. I can repurpose my time. But a not okay no is when somebody is triggered by something that you've said or done to make them feel not okay. They're saying no to express their freedom of choice. That's reactance. And we as salespeople need to know when we're potentially triggering that kind of bad no. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love it. And you're right. We have so many Sandler rules around this. And so, David Sandler himself said, hard selling is good for one thing, and that's hard pushback from the buyer. But we also talk about not getting between your buyer and the sale, right? Don't put yourself in between where you want them to go, because you're going to create this pushback and make them, you're really adding obstacles. And our job as salesperson is to remove obstacles between them and the sale. So my dad used to say it one way and getting us to kind of, suit up and bring our A game in sales or whatever we were doing. But, he kind of said is like the medical profession is like, first do no harm, right? Don't give them a reason to not buy from you. And that's a really great start, right? And I think those are great attitudes to have. But are there any other common misconceptions or places where you think that salespeople mess this up when they're thinking about trying to, a couple things come to mind for me, and I'll let you jump in, but they're trying to influence the sale, right? They're trying to control things that are uncontrollable, or they think that they have the power to talk somebody into the sale. Those are really, I think, the attitudes that get in people's way.
Yeah, totally, Mike. let's think about this, right? The things that restrict our freedom to make our own choices, right? And this is per the man, Jeff Greenberg. 1, being told what to do. 2, being told what not to do. And 3, being told how to do something. Ouch. Like, ouch. Doesn't that hurt? I mean, if you're a sales professional and you're listening to this right now, and I'm telling you right now that the ways that you can trigger reactance are when you tell someone what to do, tell someone what not to do, or tell someone how to do something. Does that not sting a little bit? I mean, how guilty are traditional salespeople, and let's be honest, all of us at some point, especially when we get excited, especially when we're feeling really competent and capable and knowledgeable and experienced and we've got the answers, how guilty are we of all of those things, right? And I would even argue that the more experienced salespeople are, this is what I love about what I do. By the way, I want to go off on a tangent here, but I'm a cynical guy when it comes to sales training in general. That's really ironic that this is what I ended up doing for a career. What I love about Sandler is that we are not your traditional sales training in a can, basic. You just graduated college and this is just, of course. I mean, we can help those people too, but we're for the experienced salespeople. We're a high level. We treat seasoned salespeople because it's the more experienced salespeople, the more knowledge and experience they have, the more guilty they are of doing all of those things, telling people what to do, what they should not do, how to do something. And so, again, even a really experienced salesperson needs some rules, some concepts to help them, like you said, stay out of their own way.
So let's talk about behavior a little bit, because whenever this comes up, I think about before, during, and after, right? There are some things we can do to prevent reactance and sort of lower their fears. I'm thinking of upfront contracts for the Sandler buzzword. There's things during the call that we could do. And you mentioned negative reversing and other tactics of like, how do we ask a question rather than tell someone what they should or shouldn't do? And then afterwards, like what happens once we've triggered reactance, we realize we've messed this up and we go, oh, they're fighting something they shouldn't be fighting here. Let's start at the beginning. How do we prevent reactance?
Well, we were just talking about, or at least you asked me to talk about the attitude component. I mean, look, I think that we have to take every thought we have captive as salespeople. And, before we even start our sales calls, we need to make sure mentally we are in the right place, that we're, neutral, third party, coming from a place of abundance, a diagnostician, like your dad said, a diagnostician. We're not here to, oftentimes in prospecting, sell. We're here to sort, through prospects, qualified ones and disqualified ones. So there's an attitude component to that. I'm going to, in this podcast, probably merge together behavior and technique into one, because I think you hit the nail on the head. Like Sandler provides an arsenal of concepts that we can leverage, like how we initiate buyer-focused conversations and how we uncover personal motivations, uncover pain. Sandler gives us questioning strategies like the dummy curve and negative reverse selling, and even and you alluded to this, even the concept of a post-sell step, so that after a selling-related conversation, we want to ensure that reactance isn't triggered even after we leave. But the main thing that I want to lean into for this podcast is upfront contracts. Like you said, upfront contracts, I've always felt, while pain is the heart and soul of Sandler, the Sandler methodology, uncovering pain is the heart. Upfront contracts is like the foundation. It's like the spinal cord and the nervous system. It's everywhere throughout the entire methodology. Upfront contracts are not just something you do at the beginning of a sales call. You do them in the middle and you do them at the end. You do them at all times. And so there's so many exciting things in the upfront contract to prevent ourselves from triggering reactance. And that's what I would say falls under techniques. Go for it.
Yeah, I like that. So tell us more about how you do an upfront contract and how that prevents reactance.
Well, one of the interesting things, Mike, is that when I'm studying up, preparing for sessions with my clients, and I'm listening to the online material or the podcasts, I noticed that there's a lot of different versions of upfront contracts that people do, and that's okay because the core concepts remain consistent. Like they're all true to Sandler. But I do have sort of my own version. I'm sure other people have a version like mine, but mine is purpose, time, consent, outcomes, and fears. Okay, those are the 5 things: purpose, time, consent, outcomes, and fears. Do you mind if we go through them real quick and talk about
Yeah,
how
sure.
each one of them sort of helps with preventing reactance? Is that fair?
Mhm.
Okay. So first of all, there's something to be said for a buildup, right? That some of these things are setting the tone of the conversation that you, prospect, are not being talked at or told what to do, but you are a part of this conversation. You might ask me later, what's my favorite Sandler rule? And I bet you that when you ask people on these podcasts, you're probably getting this answer a lot nowadays. But uh, right now, the hottest, most popular Sandler rule, I think, is that sales is a conversation between 2 adults to uncover the truth, right?
New number
So
one. Yeah.
it's the new number one. It used to be for me, people don't argue with their own data. That's another really important one, right?
Yeah.
But
That's still in the top 10 for sure.
it sure is. It always will be. But so we look at purpose, like purpose, time, consent, outcomes, fears. Purpose, starting out with, okay, sales call starts. Uh, I'm going to confirm what my assumptions are about what we're here to do, but I'm going to just make sure that I ask, what else would you need to see or hear or feel to get the sense that this has been a productive use of your time? Doesn't mean that we're a fit, but what would this need to be productive? Okay, that's just a question. We're starting out with a question. Okay, that kind of gets the ball rolling. It's kind of like in the pain funnel when the first question is, can you tell me more about that? Like that's just a good question. It just gets the ball rolling a little bit. And the next section, time. So purpose, time. I want to confirm I understand the time and whether it's a hard stop or a soft stop. Now I'm going to ask you, Mike, hasn't our freedom been threatened by salespeople who hold us hostage? Right?
Yeah.
Doesn't that
And that's
relatable?
definitely the reactance where you're like, oh my gosh, I just need to get it out of this call. I got somebody waiting. The phone's ringing. Like we said, we had a hard stop and they're not honoring it. And you feel trapped. And there's that reactance pushback for that
I've got a
person.
salesperson in front of me. They are wound up. They see a huge opportunity. They have no idea how busy I am. They have no idea what else is going on in my life. It's all about them, and I already feel like I'm a hostage, right? So to stop, and I could go off on a whole other thing with disc here because some disc styles are going to be even more sensitive to this and going to appreciate even more when a salesperson says, "Look, I just want to respect your time. What is I have 30 minutes on my calendar, but is that true for you? Is it a hard stop, soft stop?" Again, we're building up and we're laying a foundation to avoid them feeling threatened. Fair?
Yeah.
Uh, the third thing, consent. So I asked them purpose earlier, confirm the time, now consent. For me to do what we're here to do, I'm going to need to ask you some questions. I like to think consent's just permission to ask questions. I can get really specific into this too. I can get specific into questions about budget, questions about your previous cybersecurity attack, something that I know that you don't want to talk about, but we're going to have to talk about it. Are you going to be okay with that? Here's the question, Mike. Don't we feel our freedom is threatened when salespeople just start firing off questions?
Yeah. And I
You know what I'm
think
saying?
there are guards up, right? Because we have gotten those overexcited salespeople before. So again, that reactance happens when somebody's asking about something we're not ready to share yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, like you're walking into a grocery store and there's a person polling people. It's funny to me how folks rarely in those types of situations don't use the concept of an upfront contract to really get consent. I'd be willing to bet that so many more people would participate in conversations, whether it be cold calls or polling on the streets or whatever, if they just stopped and just asked consent instead of just taking people hostage. So the consent thing's important, but this again, purpose, time, consent builds up to outcomes, which I think is one of the most important parts of the upfront contract for avoiding the triggering of reactance. And it's the fact that we are going to acknowledge upfront that no is a possible outcome. And I don't know any salespeople out there who don't hear way more no's than they hear yeses. And if they're out there, I want to fill out an application, right? But most of us hear more no's than yeses, and we're just going to acknowledge that, look, that's a real possibility, and that's okay. This is just a conversation, often to determine if there's something worth pursuing here. There might not be. If I get the sense there's nothing to pursue, we're not a fit, I'm going to say so. Is that okay? Sure. Everybody says, sure, absolutely. Well, let's flip it around, though. You do me the same courtesy, right? Do me the same courtesy. Tell me if it's not a fit. I will take no offense. This is where prior to the call, when you were sitting in your car or you were sitting at your desk waiting to get onto Zoom, you've got to get your mindset in the right place so that when you say that, you mean it. You mean it. You have to really mean it. They can tell if you don't mean it. They can sense your energy transfer is not sincere. So you have to mean it, that this is okay if it's a no. I'm going to tell you that's a real possibility. And in doing that, there's nothing to fear. There's no way to feel threatened. You're lessening the likelihood of triggering that reactance where you get those bad sorts of no's where they're just saying no because they don't feel okay. They feel like they're being pushed upon, they're being sold to. Does that make sense, Mike?
Yeah, and I think we can dive more into the fears, and the biggest fear technique for me is one of my personal favorites, because when we're talking about this reactance, when I share what my biggest fear is here, I'm lowering myself on the okay, not okay scale. I'm being humble. I'm admitting something that I'm vulnerable about. It makes it more likely that they do as well. And so many salespeople go the other way. Like, I got to be 100% confident. I'm all in. Like, our product's awesome. I can't admit any weaknesses. And what that forces is somebody else to push back, then to like inspect and find those weaknesses rather than I'm admitting them. I'm disarmingly honest. I'm lowering the walls. I'm lowering the reactance.
That's a great point.
And I'm getting them to come into the conversation rather than force them to put walls up. And I think especially at the very beginning, be like, hey, my biggest fear is I'm going to be too expensive. Should we talk about that up front? Like, it just allows it to put that fear on the table rather than let it build in the background while you're having the rest of the conversation.
Well, everybody knows from, reading old books on sales and, stuff like that there's the old takeaway close, the takeaway close, well, there's something to that, right? That's negative reverse selling, basically, in an old form. But when you, under the fifth step, purpose, time, consent, outcomes, and now you brought up fears. On the fifth step in fears, when you say, look, a fear I have, a concern that I have up front is that we are never the cheapest vendor. If it's going to come down to who's the cheapest vendor, we should probably stop the conversation. We should be in the ballpark, but we're never going to be the cheapest. Should we stop the conversation? When you say that, the takeaway close, should we stop the conversation? People will exercise their freedom of choice, and qualified prospects will stay. They will stay. They will stay under their own choice, right? And that's where you have now really set the groundwork for an adult to an adult conversation, a real conversation to qualify whether or not it's a fit. You've lessened the likelihood of triggering that reactance. Go for it.
So let's talk about in the conversation and when we trigger it now. So we've talked about a few tools here. Negative questions are easier than positive assumptive questions. Asking questions and open-ended questions are a lot easier, gives them the freedom to go whichever way they want rather than specific directed ones. But oftentimes you need a lot of tools. You mentioned the takeaway. I like that one. Sandler called it the ramp up takeaway. Like, whenever you feel yourself getting really excited about something, you got to bring that excitement back down. So you're like, Brian, I got to tell you about this event we were having. It's going to be awesome. You should really come. And then you go, oh crap. But you're probably busy. And then you got to like ramp that back
right.
down
You know, it's funny. I've
and
never
take it
heard of that
away.
before. The ramp up, take away that Sandler said.
Yeah,
Huh?
otherwise you're going to be pushing too hard.
Yep.
And there's two that I love here. And since you like that one, I'll share. The other one is the start stop reverse. We teach this one in Sandler, where it's when you start to answer the question and then you stop in the middle and answer it. And I like that one because it's also when I mess up as a salesperson and I fall for the trap and they're like, how much does it cost? And you go, well, I got to tell you, Brian, we got a great deal right now. It's on sale. And then you go, wait, how many were you going to buy? And like, you catch yourself. You're like, oh, wait, I'm going to say something.
This is beautiful. This is really gold. This is gold, what you're talking about here. Because if salespeople, if people listening to this right now, if you can really be more aware of this real thing called reactance, this irrational response that humans have when they're being told what to do, told what not to do, or told how to do something, if you catch yourself doing that, then listen to what Mike just said and do those things. Stop what you're saying. Say, well, oh, you know what? You should do this, blah, 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 blah. But then again, you know what? Stop myself. I don't know. I don't know if this is that important to you, right? I don't know. You might not have the bandwidth to do something like that. There's probably no way you can reallocate any budget. It's probably a bad idea, right? You can stop yourself when you feel your feelings tell you that you're triggering their reactance. You know when you're doing it. We all do. And you can fall back on some of the techniques and concepts that Sandler gives you.
So tell us more about that too. Here in the last section is what happens once we've triggered it. When we feel their walls go up, they're checking out, they're leaning back, or they're coming at us and they go, you know what? No, I'm not doing that, or I'm not ready, or you're pushing me, or some other sort of reactance that we can visibly see and feel. What do we do then?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know. You know, there's a third. We've hit my three favorite Sandler rules today now, because my first is sales is in a conversation between two adults to uncover the truth. Second is people don't argue with their own data. So let's say that I've given them their data, like I've given them the data and they're going to argue with my data. And I've caught myself. I said, shoot, instead of guiding them on a path of self-discovery, now they're arguing with my data. I should have asked them questions and made it their data. Now, third favorite Sandler rule is that if you feel it, you say it gently. I don't know how else to answer your question, Mike. That's my best answer, is that when I feel that is happening, I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it in a way that, look, don't let me and the fact that, I've fumbled that out of my mouth. Don't let that push you away from something that could be the best thing for you, right? Like, I want to go back and re-up my upfront contract. If it's not a fit, that's fine. Like that's totally cool with me. This is really just a conversation to determine whether or not it makes sense for you, and it might not. You know what I'm saying? But I'm going to express whatever I feel in a gentle way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. There's kind of two or three things that come to mind for me. That's one of them. The other one is like when under attack, fall back. Like what you can't do is push harder and try to push them through it, because then you're just going to get harder attacks from their side, trigger more reactance. So if you feel yourself get triggered, you have to take a deep breath and go, it's my bad. It's my fault. Totally retreat. I must have gone a wrong direction. I said something I shouldn't have, take it back and ask a question, find out why. I'm sorry. It sounds like you got triggered there on something I said. What was it? And why did that happen?
Well,
and inspect it a little bit.
Another thing, Mike, is that, and this is going back to the session where reactance is talked about in negative reverse selling, is that the pendulum theory is what I should have said in the first place when you asked the question. Is that, really, I've got to look at where we are on the pendulum. And maybe I went right at the pendulum, right? So I'm pushing them back to the negative because I went right at the pendulum. So I've caused an opposite reaction, and now they're swinging back to the negative. Well, to get them to go back to the direction I want them to go, I've got to go further left of the pendulum than wherever they are. And I'm going to have to use probably some negative reverse selling to get that to happen. So that's what I like about the pendulum theory, is that it really kind of tells us what to do at any moment in time during a sale, in terms of how we position ourselves and the questions that we ask.
Yeah, I love that. And the last thing I was going to add there is just, for me, I think about being disarmingly honest. Disarmingly means we want to lower the walls.
Yeah.
And so if I say, I'm sorry, I was positioning there, or I didn't think, and I am just honest and go, look, I don't know your situation. I messed up, or even on a cold call. We have scripts like that where the first thing out of your mouth on a cold call can be, "Hey, Brian, this is a cold call. Do you want to hang up now? I'm sorry I interrupted your day." Then they can go, "Well, yeah, actually I do." Okay, fine, we'll deal with that. But if you have a couple seconds, let me tell you why I called and see if there's something there. I think those kind of disarmingly honest pattern interrupts shake people out of that emotional reactance they were experiencing, right? So we have to break the pattern. So whether it's a joke or a disarmingly honest statement, or we're doing something that's the opposite of what they expect, it allows them to kind of change their energy rather than continue down that path they were on.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think that it's really convicting when we run the test, the criteria of whatever I just said in that call, or whatever I'm thinking about saying, is that what another salesperson would say or do? And, generally speaking, people are threatened by salespeople. They're threatened by when they're in the presence of someone who's commissioned to try to get them to do something, and they're conditioned to feel that way. And so, if we're about to say or do something that would sound like another salesperson, we need to stop. And we need to do something else. So like you said, a good example, making a cold call, telling them this is a cold call. This is a sales call. If you want to hang up now, I won't be offended. They almost always will say, well, I'm really busy. What's going on? Right? I'm really busy. Why did you call? What is this about? Well, let me tell you why I called you. And then you can tell me if it makes sense for us to talk, maybe some other time. Is that fair? Boom. That's an upfront contract. And that's why I was excited about this topic. I feel like upfront contracts are the foundation of everything. That there were throughout the entire selling methodology, everywhere you look, there's an upfront contract to make it so we can really have really honest, comfortable, transparent dialogue and not trigger reactance.
There you go. You stuck the landing. So I think we should wrap it up there. Once again, we've been talking with Brian Jackson, Sandler trainer from San Diego, and you've been on the podcast many times. I've asked you, all of the usual questions, and we already shared our favorite Sandler rule. So I guess I would just say, what's the next goal for you? What are you working on this year? What's on the top of your list?
Well, without getting into numbers, Mike, I started this business 5 years ago, roughly, and with the goal of getting to a certain level of revenue. And my goal is to get to that level of revenue by the end of this year, which is really exciting. Things are in place. It's taken a lot of time and effort to build this machine, so to speak. And so I'm excited about that. Feels good.
Okay. Awesome. That sounds great. And if you're looking to get your business to the revenue goals of your dreams as well, reach out to Sandler. Go to sandler.com, find a local training center near you, or reach out to our enterprise team. If you've got international group, foreign languages, multi-locations, large enterprise stuff, we got a team for that as well. And don't forget, subscribe to the podcast, hit like, send it to somebody that you think needs to hear it, somebody in sales that is triggering a lot of reactance. Maybe I won't tell them you sent it to them for that reason. I think I just did. Hopefully they won't listen to the end. Nobody listens to the end. We'll hit the music here so that they'll tune out, but we appreciate whatever you are, be a good one. That's what I always say. The How to Succeed podcast is brought to you by Sandler, the worldwide leader in sales, management, and customer service training with over 200 locations. For more information, visit sandler.com.